And speaking also of Jason Burmis, who was involved in that film and is now heavily involved in helping Alex Jones down there, he was speaking about Ted Kennedy's death, and he said, Ted Kennedy got something wrong, and you're going to regret that, Ted Kennedy. If we have souls, you'll regret it. If we have souls?
It just shows you the level of person that's working closely with him.
Other times everyone say, God bless, and it's just, well... And so the thing is that they do many, many very good things on a lot of levels, and so we don't want to discount that or minimize that they are doing quite a lot. And in fact, I would even say that they're waking up so many people that some of the forces that are behind the New World Order, the main driving powers behind it, are realizing that Alex Jones and Infowars.com and his films have woken up so many people. In fact, he's probably the main reason that Jesse Ventura came out with this book that he just recently came out with on conspiracy theories. And so he actually probably deserves the credit for that book, I think, in a certain way, and that getting out there. It's something where he's waking up people are becoming informed on these other issues, but people stop at the New World Order, the Federal Reserve, the truth about 9/11, and they don't realize the bigger issue. The bigger issue is about saving your soul. And you can know everything you would ever want to know about the New World Order, what's coming and everything else. If you end up in hell, it won't profit you one bit.
And his message, and it comes out from time to time, is so empty that the fight, it is ultimately worthless, because if you die without the knowledge of what you need to gain eternal life, all of this effort fighting for your freedoms will mean nothing, because everyone's going to die anyway. It's also interesting that he promotes the spread of marijuana. He may not recommend people to smoke marijuana, but by fighting for its legalization and promoting films that are big-time films promoting the legalization of marijuana, he promotes marijuana and doesn't condemn its use, when the apocalypse makes it clear that that kind of drug use, pharmakeia, is basically a gateway to the devil. It's basically sorcery.
In fact, going back to the radio program, his radio program, I believe it was 3 hours a few years ago, and I never listened to his radio program except for like a few YouTube clips a while back. And I listened to one of the programs because we had an ad playing every day on his program several years ago, and so I wanted to hear when the ad came on one time. And after a few hours of it, I mean, it's just like, wow. I mean, how much can you take? I mean, how much information do you need each day on this subject? I mean, granted, Alex makes it as interesting probably as a person could that's speaking about these subjects, but I mean, after a while, I mean, you're just ready to almost throw up. It's just too much, and these people, some of them just tune in day after day, hour after hour. Now it's 4 hours long. I mean, it's just...
Well, speaking about the point you were talking about earlier, that he's waking up more and more people, he's almost becoming like his own television network, and the alternative media is starting to take over, and the mainstream media is weakening. And for that reason, I believe that the mainstream media and the people in control of trying to bring in this police state, trying to bring us into the New World Order fully, are getting more and more desperate, because more and more people are waking up, and I think that's why we're hearing more about the moves for possibly shutting down the Internet, because they're going to lose the information war about what's going on with more and more and more people if these alternative means aren't really stopped. And so from that standpoint, he represents basically one of the biggest obstacles to the total fall of America, because, and so that's
the biggest.
Yeah, he's probably the biggest from the discounting spiritual forces, which really are behind everything, but just analyzing it in terms of secular issues, he's the biggest obstacle to the total takeover of America. I'd have to say that. And so that's why we want to say that he does do a lot of good in that arena,
yeah.
but
And in fact, speaking about that, I think that's why we can see the conspiracy now moving very quickly to try to implement probably a national ID card, as you mentioned, taking away internet freedom, putting us on Internet 2, where only corporate-approved websites will be allowed, and they'll sort of, just get rid of websites like Infowars.com and other alternative websites that are giving people real news, real true information. And that's why I would still, from a secular standpoint, from a secular news standpoint, his website is still by far the best website that's out there getting news on different issues.
And some people say, well, no, he's an agent, and that is frankly ridiculous. And they say, well, he doesn't expose more of the Jewish or Israeli control. And some of his films actually have done that, like the film Fabled Enemies spent some time exposing Israeli control. And the reason he doesn't emphasize those issues more is not because, as some people wrongly believe, he's a Jewish agent. That is absurd. Or a CIA agent, as others have said. It's because he wants to remain as mainstream as possible. As we can see, he'll compromise almost anything to be as big as possible. And so he believes that if he focused more on those issues, that he would be marginalized by the controlled press and sort of cast more to the fringe.
Yeah, and if he were part of that kind of conspiracy, then he would never have some of the guests that he's had on, like this guy James Trafficant, or Ted Pike and others that he's had on there. It's just that doesn't add up.
And so the people who say that, we have to say, have a lack of insight and a lack of grace, I believe. I think it's ridiculous. I think it's uncharitable. I think it's completely false, notwithstanding the other problems we've mentioned.
And going back to some of the problems, of course, we're going to be talking, probably do a separate program, exposing this film, A Lamp in the Dark. But he's also promoted recently this guy, Lindsey Williams. And one of the problems with Lindsey Williams is the fact that when you look at some of the predictions, and I only listened to one program, his most recent one, where he had Lindsey Williams on his program. And Lindsey Williams, he talks to some older guy that was some big oil executive, and he still claims that he has contact with the leaders of the New World Order. And he'll talk to Lindsey and divulge some of the details as to what the conspirators are planning in the near future as to their global agenda for mankind. But what's interesting is that he said that Obama would never be elected president, that the conspiracy would never allow him to be president. And he told this, I guess, to Alex or to someone else before the elections, last presidential elections. And, of course, that prediction was incorrect. And so that by itself proves that this guy who, speaking to Lindsey Williams, is not part of the insiders, because he wouldn't get that wrong if he really knew all about this stuff. I mean, when you listen to these programs, this guy's telling Lindsey Williams what's going to happen over in Asia, Europe, and someone would say, well, it seems like a lot of this stuff is accurate. Well, you can read Infowars.com and a lot of newspapers, and you can pretty much figure out what's going on and what the trends are and what may happen in the near future. But the biggest key for me about Lindsey Williams, and probably he could be researched, all his programs, and bring out information that would be very interesting, exposing what I think is either, I think, the possibility of this guy that's speaking to Lindsey Williams was a top oil executive up in Alaska and thinks he still knows what's going to happen, and so he's telling Lindsey Williams, oh yeah, we're going to have this happen, that happen. And it's something where when you look at Obama will never be allowed to be president, well, we know that's wrong, so that proves that the guy's not reliable. He doesn't have inside information. But the other question you have to have is that Lindsey's saying that this guy would never lie, he's close to the graveyard, he's quite old. Okay, well then why is he still talking to the leaders of the New World Order and getting information and sort of on what's going to happen? That doesn't make any sense. And so, but the biggest thing for me was and I actually happened to meet Lindsey Williams 15 years ago, but was the price. And I said to Brother Peter is that if he's selling these DVDs for like a lot of money, then I know there's a big problem with the story. So anyway, I called the 800 number, or 888 number that is offered to get some of his tapes to find out what the prices were. And because he mentioned, he said, we won't refuse anyway. Now, another thing that Lindsey Williams said about Alex Jones, he said, believe everything he says. Believe everything Alex tells you. He says, all the truth, whatever he says, believe. You couldn't even say that about a pope. The Catholic Church doesn't even teach that about a true pope. It's only in very limited situations. And he's saying that whatever comes out of his mouth, that's ridiculous.